guys, we are good to go. All right, Sherry Thomas, go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, good, you did.
Yes, I unmuted myself right before my calling my mother alarm rang on my phone.
Oh no!
but I made sure to call her earlier today, so we're good.
Good. Is she handled? She's okay then?
It's all handled. Yes.
Well, awesome. Well, Sherry, thank you so much for calling us this evening. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I just want to say, this is such a comfortable session, because I have never been in a Zoom session where everybody got introduced. It's always like you go in, you talk, and then sometimes I kind of wonder who all are there, but it's like there's no time to do anything or look at anything when you're like talking to the host. So this has been like really comfortable.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to like record. I'm going to keep that and I'm going to use that as a little pull quote. So thank you.
Oh, okay.
Well, Sherry, I know that most people are here to see who've already read you, know a lot about you, but for a few of our newer to you readers, do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit how you got started writing?
Yeah, my name is Sherry Thomas, and I got started writing 20 some years ago. I'm going to say 22, somewhere between 22 and 23 years ago, when I was a harried stay-at-home mom who was not very good at that particular job. And one day I read a romance, new to me romance by an author that I enjoyed very much as an adolescent. And oh boy, I hated that book. I hated it so much that if I were the type of person to throw a library book, across a room on the wall, I would have, but I didn't. I set it down and I kind of like brooded about it. And when my husband came home that night, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna write romances myself. I was like, I figure if the book that bad, or at least a book, I shouldn't say bad because sometimes it's relative. I think a book displeased me that much can be on the New York Times list. I was like, I'm gonna have a go at it myself. And thereby started the long process of learning just how difficult it was to write a book, even that's not any good. So yeah, and then I wrote for 8 years. This was back in the Jurassic age. So I wrote for 8 years before I could get anybody to publish me. This was before self-publishing was viable. And since then, so since I thought I knew a historical romance is best, I had read a lot of those. So I thought I'll start in historical romance. I didn't know that once you start in a genre, people kind of want you to stay in a genre. My plan was always to write one book of historical romance and then switch to writing futuristic romance. Remember when it was a thing, futuristic romances, like set on spaceships? And I was like, yeah, that sounds more like my cup of tea. But by the time I published, I knew that you have to sort of keep going. So I stayed in historical romance for as long as I could. At that time, I was basically running out of ideas by book 7. By book 7, I pulled out my amnesia plot. And so book 8 and book 9, book 9 is the last historical romance that I published. Book 8 and book 9 were under the bed books, means I had written them before, at least once before I published. So so my last original idea was a amnesia plot. That's when I said, "Hey, yeah, girl, time to take a break. Have no more good story ideas." And that was also when I asked my publisher if they would not mind buying some historical mystery books from me featuring a gender-bending Sherlock Holmes. And my lovely editor at that time, who has since moved on to a different publishing house, she was like the most loosey-goosey and adventurous person there is. And she said, sure, we'll buy it.
That's awesome.
And that's how I ended up switching to a slightly different direction. I was helped by the fact that when I submitted the Lady Sherlock proposal, romance writers were leaving publishing houses in droves.
Yeah.
For the greener pasture of self-publishing. I think in a different time, I would have been probably told to just stay in your lane, but I was successfully able to change lane because of that particular historical moment.
There was room in the marketplace for it because so many people had kind of fled off for it. That was
there were basically publishers wanted to keep up. They needed some people in their stable to keep stay in business, and like, what do you want to write? Okay, whatever. Yeah, here you go. Have this contract.
So did you feel like it was a natural switch for you to go from historical romances to historical Victorian period?
I was already writing in almost the exact same period.
Mhm.
I had books set in like the 80s, the 90s, the 1880s and the 1890s. So period wise, that was not anything of a challenge. The only challenge was plotting, I guess.
Yeah.
But I had done a young adult YA series, and the middle book of the series. By the time I finished writing it, I realized I had written a mystery, and I felt it was a pretty competent mystery. So that gave me confidence to try it in a straight up mystery.
That's so cool. So were you going back to Baby Sherry when you were reading? Did you gravitate naturally more toward mysteries in your younger reading days, or were you romance or just kind of whatever you get your hands on?
Oh, it was definitely whatever I could get my hands on. For folks who may not know, I am an immigrant, and I spent the first 13 years of my life in China, where and I was not born in a like what you call first tier city. So even though our circumstances were fairly easy, just like there just weren't a whole like it just wasn't a very great supply of books on the marketplace.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I was very early in my life given a book called 365 Stories for Children. It only had the first volume out of the two.
Oh,
And
no.
no matter where I went in my hometown, I could never find volume 2. Nobody had seen volume 2. It was like the unicorn.
Did you ever find volume 2? I have to know.
No, never.
Rude.
So I don't know whether they even had a volume 2. I thought maybe people just published volume 1 and just decided that's it.
The editor, the publishing house was like,
stories.
we don't need any more stories.
Yeah. So it was books were like, and I was a fast reader. So any book basically was like, yeah, just give it to me. But still, I was very much gravitated toward science fiction, Chinese martial arts epics. And when I was a little bit older and when these books suddenly became available, romances. And I think I first read Sherlock Holmes, the original canon stories in Chinese, because my grandfather worked for, he was a professor at a medical college, and he had access to the medical college's library. We didn't really have a robust public library system. But he had access to his college's library, and he was able to get me, Sherlock Holmes and Jules Verne, all the 80 Days Around the World. I even read, for those of you who are better versed in like 18th century literature or 19th century, I even read 20 Years After, which is a sequel to The Three Musketeers, without having ever read The Three Musketeers.
I didn't even know that.
I mean, I made it through that book. Even though wasn't really sure what it was going on about, I made it through that book in Chinese just because of the lack of reading material. I mean, it's like, I used to go through a newspaper at lunchtime every day. Granted, we had like much thinner newspapers, so it is not I'm going through the New York Times every day. Yeah, but
that is,
I read everything, but I really love the genre stories.
And so getting to tell those stories, getting to do your own spin on them was always very appealing to you then.
Oh, I had no idea I wanted to be a writer until that moment in my early 20s when I threw that book, figuratively across the room and said, that's it. So yeah, I had, but as far as Sherlock Holmes was concerned, it was right around the time I had sold my first romance that I first read this book called The Beekeeper's Apprentice, which is a Sherlock Holmes reimagining by Laurie R. King. And basically, in that book, she gave a much older Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes was this was like the early 1900s, and Sherlock Holmes was in his early 50s, and she gave him a young apprentice who is like a young female apprentice who is like his equal in powers of observation and in like force of personality. And I was completely entranced by that book. And it was the first time in my life I thought, oh, wow, this is so good. I would like to be able to do something like that at some point. But at that point, I had not written anything that was plot heavy. So I didn't know whether I could do that. So that wasn't until I saw the BBC Sherlock that I was like, oh, now I really want to do one on my own. And this was post the mystery YA fantasy. And I thought, I could have a go at it.
Yeah, it was time. You were like, I did my accidental mystery in the Burning Sky series, and now it's time to,
and I
explore
thought
it more.
I haven't failed in writing mysteries yet, so let's go and give it a try until I fail.
Well, and then to take I know that it's a reimagining, but to still keep enough of the Sherlock Holmes feeling and vibe for readers to sort of connect and to see that thread. What was your process going towards when you were sort of crafting Lady Sherlock, but then also how did you keep the sort of the vibe of the Holmes alive within the series?
I think the most important vibe is the actually might be Sherlock Holmes's personality.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at Sherlock Holmes's personality, it is very much like the classic Holmesian, because classic Holmes was like a little brusque, but he really wasn't an asshole that BBC Sherlock kind of turned out to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I love BBC Sherlock, but as the series wore on, I was like, I'm beginning to like this Sherlock Holmes less and less.
And less every time.
Last season it happened, I was like, I hate Watson too. And I was like, how did this happen?
That's when you know you're like, I have to step away. I hate all my favorite characters.
I'm glad they decided to step away too. I feel like the personality, the character traits, the classic cool, cerebral detachment is kind of like what kind of grounds people in the Holmesian universe more than anything else. She has like different vices and different interests, but in terms of that Holmesian vibe, I don't think anybody can say she's different. So in that, I feel that's the, and then you just throw in little. I actually haven't. For the first book, I reread A Study in Scarlet. For the second book, I tried to, go through some stories, but there weren't that many Sherlock Holmes stories around to retell exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So then it kind of just like branched off on its own, and the people that come and go, and they have some Holmesian bearing, and there's of course Moriarty. But the thing is, Moriarty, if you read the whole big old canon, actually isn't a huge character at all. He appears in like 3 or 4 stories, out of like tons and tons of stories that Conan Doyle wrote. But he, as I think in a modern day reimagining, it's good to have that arch enemy there to kind of like keep Charlotte on her toes.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. So going back with the series, how many more books do you have planned in the series? Do you think you can kind of see it as an open-ended, since you don't have to kind of follow, the same arcs as the original Arthur Conan Doyle stories?
It will be overestimating me to say I'm planning anything, because like my husband says, he's astonished that I write novels for a living because I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. I cannot plan for the long term at all. I never think about the long term. I never plan for it. But I used to say, I think 10 books would complete the first story arc, and then we'll see if anybody still wants more books. Right now I'm thinking 10 books or maybe 12. I still think that will be the first large story arc, will take that much to complete. And this is from somebody who still has no idea what's happening in the second part of this large story arc.
Right. I was gonna say, do you know how that, not that you're gonna tell us, obviously, but do you know how the series ends in your head? Do you have an idea?
No.
Okay.
None at all.
You're like, I know it's just gonna take 12 books to get there.
I like, my brain does not like to work too much. So, and I'm not terribly good at at planning out books. I used to try, back when I was more of a rookie writer, I used to try to write synopsis. And I realized that for me, whatever synopsis I come up with, it never ends up in the final book.
Stakes are interesting.
Yeah, it never ends up in the book. Always veers off in a different direction. So I've stopped planning and just I'll think about it when I have to.
That's funny. So do you still enjoy the process of writing then?
Occasionally. Occasionally, usually when I'm writing a cheat book, that's when I really enjoy the process of writing.
A cheat book? I want to know what a cheat book is.
A cheat book is a book you're not contracted for, a book that nobody knows you're writing, and it may not ever see the light of day. It's just you're writing for your own pleasure. When I write a cheat book, that's when I really enjoy writing. For everything else, I enjoy having written.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a job. It is a job. You get up and you go, okay, I have to write 1,000 words today, and you get it down. You go, woohoo! Now I can go do something else. It does not affect. I don't think it affects the quality of the book. Just because I think of it more as a job, the writing process. Because when I get into the revision process, when the deadline really breathes on the back of my neck, I am still as involved with the book as anything else. And I always, there are times when you hear less experienced writers get really upset if they fall asleep writing their own books. And I'm always like, if you haven't fallen asleep right on the keyboard writing your own book, you haven't had a deadline. You will fall asleep doing just about anything. Trust me. No matter how much you think you love doing that thing, you will fall asleep doing it. You will fall asleep writing your own book. I have fallen asleep writing some of my favorite titles in my own, body of work.
Well, and if anyone's ever seen the romance documentary Between the Covers, we also know that you tend to lock yourself in your bathroom to do some writing too.
Right. Now that my kids are old, I don't have to stay in the bathroom so much anymore. Now I can properly stretch out on a couch. I had 2 brief periods of empty nesting even this year. COVID brought my younger son back from college a 2 months after he left, and then again, his new semester's again ended, so he's again home.
He's home already still.
Yeah.
Yep.
But nowadays nobody's gonna jump on me if I lie myself flat on the couch. So it's good.
That's cool. Is it hard? Has it been hard having everybody back in the house and cutting out time for work?
Not at all. I think my kids are like me. They like to stay in their own rooms and not talk to anybody.
That's funny. Are you the biggest reader in your household, or does everybody read?
My older son has always been a big reader. I'm not sure how much he's reading now, but I actually never heard of Chinese web novels until I learned that he was reading them in translation a bunch of years ago. And so if he read Chinese web novels as long as the ones I've subsequently tackled, then he was reading a good deal.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I love when a whole family can read together. Okay, so another question that we had was, what are some of the challenges that you find when you're coming up with the different crimes and murders, especially now that you've got to come up with 12 of them? Do you enjoy that part? How do you kill people in your books? Sherry, go.
Sometimes I don't even. Whenever I read a mystery and read about a really innovative way to kill people, I'm always like, wow, that's so good. How did you think of it? But then I don't know whether, gosh, I cannot remember the name of it. I always forget the name of that book. But has anyone here heard of, I think this gentleman's name is John Dixon Carr? And he's like a golden age mystery writer. He's famous for some locked room mysteries. And there's this book, I think it may have been called either The Three Coffins or The Gold Coffin, something with coffin in the title, in which, I kid you not, toward the end of the book, the detective actually give you a complete breakdown of all types of locked room mysteries possible. like all types.
Mhm.
From the mercury melted to like a gas melted above a bathtub or whatnot, to the kind where the person was only shot after the room was open. You just didn't know it, so on and so forth. So after you read a treatise like that, you realize, there is actually no new plot under the sun.
Right.
It's just how you write it. So I don't have to be terribly, terribly innovative in coming up with my crime. Sometimes it's just a body on the ground. It's just a really simple body on the ground.
Sometimes it's just there,
But it's just there, and the thing I try to do is make the body count. I was like, if there's a body on the ground, let's make it count. Let's make it really matter. Why? And let's make it really important that people should care about why there's this body and whose lives is going to be turned upside down by this investigation. So that's more what I'm going for instead of like super innovative ways to kill people off.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting way of approaching it too, because people often forget about how a death affects other people, especially in mysteries, because it's like, now I've got to just solve it. But to take the time to sort of consider that's like such a nice element and depth to the stories.
Yeah, one of the things I actually like best about a mystery novel is having never been through a murder investigation myself, either directly or peripherally. I only know about murder investigations via fiction, and the thing is that nobody has any secrets, right? When a murder investigation is going on. When murder investigation is going on, you have to account for where you are, what you were doing, and who you were with. And for a lot of people, if you give them a long enough slice of time, nobody wants everything they do to be known in that time. Nobody because nobody wants to be known exactly for who they were, and who they were seeing, what they were doing, what they were thinking. So it becomes a very interesting study in, I don't want to go so much to say sociology, but it becomes a very interesting, human study and also kind of societal study in seeing what kind of constraints people are under, what they're trying to hide, who they're trying to be, and who they're trying not to be in the eyes of the public. That's what I like about the murder investigation. Interestingly, a person who died in an interesting way is just like icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then to have historical versus modern, you get to kind of play. You get to play within the constraints of the time too, and
exactly. And also, then I don't have to know anything about modern investigative techniques. Thank God.
DNA, not a problem here. No cell phones. Great. So, do you think that historical is where you want to stick? Do you want to do contemporary? I know with the YA, it was a little blending of it, but do you think?
I have done one contemporary romance. Meg actually asked in the comments, feel free to share your cheat books. Whenever I have completed a cheat book, I have actually shared it with people. My contemporary romance was actually one of the, I worked on that book for 8 years and enjoyed every minute of it because it was a cheat book all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So anytime I have completed anything, I have in the end shared it. But I like contemporary. Contemporary is a different thing, and I feel more relaxed and just more playful, I think, when I write contemporary, as opposed to something I'm contracted for and need to there's somebody waiting, and like eventually there'll be production editors who like breathing down your side.
Well, and like the idea that you had for the book changes so much by the time the product is presented to readers and stuff too.
Yes, and sometimes my brain just like, it is just that with book 5. I'm glad the Lady Sherlock book 5 has turned out well, but phew, it was like, really, it was like trying to scoop out my own brain with a spoon when I was writing it. And book was so late, and of course I go nuts at the the deeper we get into the production process. So by the time I get the galleys back, galleys when the page is already printed as they're in a book, but you're getting loose pages, and everything has to be, all the changes have to be made by hand. That's when I go crazy. I think I turned this one in. They said, you made 1,000 changes, over 1,000 changes. We're gonna charge you for it. I was like, how much are you gonna charge me for it? They said $420. Oh, I said, that's fine. Just charge me $420.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, no, even if you're willing to pay, we won't do it because we don't have enough time. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? They say, take out half the changes. And seriously, at that point, I could not go through the book one more time, just could not. So I said, no. I just said, no, you do whatever you need to do. You postpone this book till next year if you want. I am not looking at it again.
Yeah.
But they only postponed it by a month. And it was really, really funny because a few days after we basically said, oh, we'll postpone it, we got our first starred review. And I was like, that's too quick. They read the uncorrected version, right? They read the version before I corrected, made those 1,000 small changes. And they said, yeah, they read that and they gave you a star review. I said, let's never tell production that, or they're going to come for my head on the plate.
It's like that secret never needs to go anywhere. It's like Vegas. That is so funny. Well, Sherry, we have time for one more question of our official interview portion before we switch over to our Q&A with readers for follow-ups. I think my last question for you is kind of about the outfits that are in the book and how you come up with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Talk about kind of coming up with different ones and like why that was a part of her story.
When I originally conceived of Charlotte, she was kind of like an exact female equivalent of Sherlock Holmes. Kind of like, I'm not sure whether she had an aquiline nose, but she was definitely dressed in dark clothes because I don't know what Sherlock Holmes wore, but in the 80s show, he was always in like the classic Victorian dark clothes. And then I was like, this is boring.
Truth.
So and part of the reason a lot of times female intelligence is not taken seriously was because it doesn't come in the same guise as, a smart woman might not look the same way as a smart man looks. And one of my dearest friends loves lipstick, loves low-cut blouses, and she has a magnificent rack for those low-cut. And but she loves makeup. I used to swear to people she has 3 cubic feet of makeup on her bathroom counter. And yet this woman has like, every degree along the way to a PhD, and a PhD too. And is, one of the smartest person I've ever met, and most insightful. And so I was like, who would look at such, and she dressed, and I mentioned the clothes, right? So I was like, who look at this person would realize within a minute or two that, she has a PhD and all these other accomplishments. So that became much more my inspiration for how Charlotte looks. And then, once you decide to give somebody outlandish clothes, it just becomes fun. It just becomes fun. It's kind of like, how in the Stephanie Plum books, when she blows up one car accidentally, in every book, she has to blow up a car.
Absolutely.
So then,
bigger and better the next time.
What strange and odd thing can Charlotte wear?
Do you worry that you'll run out of ideas for her?
I don't think so. I mean, it's clothes. It's clothes. When do people ever run out of ideas for clothes?
True facts.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sherry, before we say goodbye to you, how can readers find out more about you and stay in touch with you?
My website is sherrythomas.com, and I think the Lady Sherlock books have their own website. It may just be ladysherlockbooks.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Sherry Thomas, and if you go to my website, you can find me on social media. So it's not hard to find me. I'm not around a lot, but it's not hard to find me.
I love that. That's like the greatest motto. It's not hard to find me, but I'm not around a lot. All right. Well, Sherry, thank you so much for joining us. And we really do appreciate that you'll stay a little bit extra to take some extra questions.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so enjoyable.